Hey, good morning, Barney. Thanks for joining again today. How are you?
Good. Good to see you, Tom. Thanks.
Absolutely. So thanks again, and everybody for joining us today for another episode of ATBS's Rearview Mirror Series, where we're talking about getting out of trouble with the IRS, or really getting back on track with your taxes and your situation with the IRS. Now, hopefully, everyone watched the previous episode, which was related to the first step in ATBS's three-step proven process to get you out of trouble with the IRS, which is related to obtaining compliance with the IRS, getting caught up on your taxes, paying your taxes. Everything that you are going to see from today and the next 4 or 5 episodes, however many that we're going to finish with here, will mean absolutely nothing to you if you have not gone through and gotten a good understanding of the previous episode and you have a plan in place to execute on what we talked about in the previous episode. So let me just preface this by saying we're going to talk about a lot of great stuff today and over the next couple of weeks, but make sure you go and watch, I believe it's episode 2, not the intro, episode 2 related to obtaining compliance with the IRS, or else the rest of this it's not going to do you any favors. It's really not going to help your situation out too much. But that being said, as always, we have our keynote speaker and expert, Barney Moran here. Barney, I'm going to go ahead and share a quick slide. And then for anybody who may have not seen previous episodes with us, if you would just walk them through, your brief history, expertise, all that good stuff, and then we can go ahead and get started.
Well, hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Barney Moran. I'm an enrolled agent, and all that really means is I've passed the 3 IRS tests, which allow me to represent taxpayers either on paper with filings or actually in the actual tax court. There are real tax courts, and enrolled agents are given permission to represent taxpayer situations before a tax judge. I've been in the tax industry for 20 years. I'm a husband and father of 2 daughters here in Colorado, and I'm very thankful to be able to work here at ATBS, where I can really speak the truth to truckers about their options, doing as much as they can themselves to save money, and explaining what we can do when it makes sense for us to help them.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining. We're always happy to have you. You are the core expert here, and personally, I don't think anybody does it better in all of trucking than you. So thanks again. Now, today, everybody, this series is really about getting out of trouble with the IRS, right, and getting back on track. And so today's episode is related to negotiation with the IRS, which I know is probably the sexiest, the most exciting piece of what we're talking about here at ATBS. But again, nothing of what we're going to talk about today matters if you haven't obtained compliance with the IRS. So just one last plea from Barney and I, go watch the previous episode if you're just starting this series before you get here today. Now, Barney and I could probably talk for days about negotiating with the IRS. So we've broken today's episode out into being more of an overview of the process of negotiation, what happens before and during. And we're not going to get into some of the negotiation tactics that a lot of folks like Barney would use to help you negotiate. We're going to have an entirely separate episode a couple weeks from now talking about the tools and the tactics and the strategies that we use during negotiation. But today, it just seems like, and it was for me until I learned, that negotiating with the IRS is just really foggy. No one really knows what it is. It's really intimidating. So today, what Barney and I are just going to try and focus on is simplifying what the process is. We want to pull back the curtains. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz when you find out it's just one old guy pulling on knobs and levers back there and making it look worse than it is. So Barney and I are here to make sure that we just provide some clarity. But Barney, if you would, I would just love it, because we're, as of recording, we're rolling into tax season 2021, and things are heating up. It's getting busy. There's a lot going on. A lot has changed with taxes and everything because of the CARES Act in 2020. We're not really going to get into those details, but I'll just tell everybody it's really busy at ATBS, but it's really busy for the IRS too. So Barney, if you would, just kind of give us, an overview of the state of the IRS today, and tell people what they can expect, and maybe some of the benefits of what's going on to their situation.
Yeah, and this is a critical thing because we can talk about all the tips and how to negotiate in the best possible position as possible. And then you go on your way empowered with this. And the problem currently is you call the IRS all ready to go, you've taken your notes, and you can't get through. And this actually came up this morning. I was trying to call on behalf of a trucker, and I usually try to give myself at least an hour and a half. I had about 2 hours before this meeting to try to get through to the IRS and get something done. And so as an enrolled agent, we are given kind of a bat phone to the IRS. ATBS has a special practitioner line that we are allowed to use as enrolled agents and CPAs. And it's supposed to get us through to the IRS quicker. But I will share what happened on my call this morning. First of all, I couldn't get through on my first several attempts. I was told that they couldn't take my call at this time. That means their call lines are so crowded, they're not even going to let you in the queue.
And this is
so I just keep calling back.
And that's on the practitioner line.
And this is on the backdoor practitioner line, yeah. So I am hearing, what I'm going to share with you on the practitioner line, I'm hearing from truckers on the public line. So it's happening to both of us. I did finally get through this morning after about 20 minutes. I felt I have enough time, I think, to get through. The IRS message picked up. It asked me which queue I want to go to, and we can talk about that. And I chose the collections department. This trucker had been moved to collections, so I wanted to speak to an IRS agent authorized to talk about a taxpayer who's in collections.
Sure.
And I got a message listening. Your call will be picked up in 15 to 30 minutes. So I was on hold listening to that wonderful IRS music for 37 minutes. I notated it. And then a message came on saying we are unable to complete your call at this time, and then it hung up on me.
Ouch.
So that pretty much describes the current state of the IRS at this time. And I do want to share with truckers who are trying to empower when it makes sense to do it themselves. We're going through this too, in terms of just even getting in the door. That has now become kind of a major hurdle. So I want to get that out there up front. And unfortunately, I do have several stories of truckers who really understand their situation. Their balance isn't crazy high enough where they need a professional, and they know how to do it themselves. There's no question they're ready to go, and they've still retained ATBS to do the negotiation simply because of this, because they can't get through. Yep. And that is a crime, really. But it's been happening, and I just want to share that with you. If you've got the time, another thing a lot of people don't know, the IRS is not 9 to 5. They are open a wider range of times. They go off your area code. So whatever area code phone number you have, whether you're in a different part of the country trucking, the IRS is going to look at your area code, and they're going to give you a window, and it's usually 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the area code of the country your phone is, that they're going to respond to your call. So one smart move, dial right away at 7 a.m. your time on your area code, or even a quarter to 7 a.m. And at some point you may get into the queue, and that's the trick. You just want to get in the door of the phone system and then wait. Of course, occasionally you'll get what happened to me, where you've done everything right, and they still say we can't talk to you. But that is the state. We want to tell you that up front.
Yeah, and from everything that we hear and read about, it just seems like the IRS is understaffed, overworked, and probably underfunded too. And so, at the end of the day, one of the things that we talk about a lot here, IRS agents are human beings too, and it's just as hard and frustrating for them to try and work through this amount of work as it is for us to try and get through the amount of work that we're trying to alleviate for our clients. And so we're going to talk about phone etiquette today, phone manners, and remembering that, the IRS, the people that work at the IRS are just human beings, just like the rest of us. And so it's good to remember that it can be really hard to get somebody on the phone, but when you do, try not to let that frustration show through, because it's not necessarily the agent's fault. They're fielding phone calls every second of every day that they are in there. Do you think that there's, any sort of benefit to this? Do you think that because the IRS is so backed up that they may be more apt to negotiate, or do you think it's kind of a wash from that standpoint?
No, that's a great question. And ATBS, our position is we always make lemonade out of lemons, and we can actually take advantage of this problem. One is whether we're doing it for you, this is what I and my team are going to do, or if we walk you through doing it yourself, is you document this. You document the day you tried to call, how long you were on hold, and if you got this mixed message from the IRS and was hung up on. Because when you do finally get through, this work, these attempts are all great examples of your due diligence trying to work things out with the IRS. And that mistreatment can translate into better treatment in the negotiation. So absolutely, we want to take the situation we're being given and make it work for us. And that is one example. And the other is, I do think when you can get a good agent on the phone, and we'll talk about why I'm saying a good agent, I do find they're more flexible right now. They know the situation we're in. Many people, because of the current economic issue, are not negotiating. They're just avoiding it.
Sure.
So those of you that want to take this on and want to cut a good deal and get this behind you now, I am advising this is the best time, even with the inability to get through a lot of the time. Once you get through, I am finding IRS agents are more flexible than I've ever seen them.
Well, that's one silver lining to everything that's going on. So between the current economic environment and dealing with the IRS, at least there's one little nugget in there that could potentially be beneficial for us. So that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, good. Thanks for the update, Barney. So let's go through and talk about negotiation today. And really what we're going to talk about is what to do prior to the call with the IRS. And then generally speaking, just what happens during the phone call and some tips and tricks and things like that we have, whether you're doing this yourself or whether it's someone like ATBS who's going to help you out. So what I really want to focus on first though, Barney, obviously getting back to the original disclaimer that there's a lot of work that has to be done before you call. And there's generally three things, right? Number one, Barney and I talked about this last week, is that you got to reform yourself in the eyes of the IRS, which means you've got to get compliant and you have to begin showing that you are willing to play the game is probably the wrong term, but you got to be able to show them that you are willing to comply by paying your taxes on time, by filing your taxes on time. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I know Barney mentioned it last week, was just obviously you got to get caught up on filing, but paying your quarterly tax estimates is easier than it ever has been before. I believe there's an app now that people can pay their quarterlies with, right?
Correct. IRS, the number 2, GO, IRS to go. It's an IRS app. It's been out for over a year now. We've had tremendous success with our truckers on the road. We simply have a smartphone, downloading the app, and at a minimum, when we say pay estimated payments, again, and we've said this in our earlier episodes, the activity of
Right.
paying the estimate is the key thing here. Don't get frozen by saying, I don't have enough to pay what I owe for the quarter. Just do an activity of payment. A couple things. One is you can always throw more money later on at your estimate.
Sure.
But by every quarter on time showing the activity, and I've even gone down as low as $1 with a trucker. I've had truckers say, look, I don't have any money. I have no money right now. I've just said, can you skip the cheese on the cheeseburger tonight, and before the quarter ends, send them $1. Because the IRS computer will just punch, hey, we have activity this quarter on an estimated payment. In
Right.
fact, if you make 4 estimated payment activities on time through the year, you actually take off the table the IRS denying some of your benefits because you did not make estimated payments. They can't actually get into, oh, it wasn't enough, because they're estimates.
That's
So we
true.
want to remove anything that's stopping you from the activity of making that estimated payment.
So this is what we talk about from the standpoint of reforming yourself in the eyes of the IRS, getting compliant by getting caught up, and then making those payments. And so, in a normal year, 2020 notwithstanding, it wasn't a normal year. Things got moved around. In a normal year, you got to pay your taxes every quarter. The first one is due on April 15th, which surprises a lot of people, but we can explain why. June 15th, September 15th, and then January 15th of the next year, right, Barney? Okay.
Correct.
So, when people learn about quarterly estimates the first time and they hear that the first one's due on April 15th, they blow a fuse. Oh, why would the IRS have me pay my taxes and then pay a quarterly estimate at the same time? But you got to remember, they're not the same thing. Paying your taxes happens every quarter. And by the time, if you do this on time every year, by the time April 15th rolls back around, that's when you file your tax return and you find out whether you paid too much and you do a refund, you didn't pay enough, and you owe a little bit more. So it can be really detrimental if you fall behind, because then it's just, like adding insult to injury on April 15th when you're trying to pay taxes that you didn't pay last year and get going on this year. So we know if you are behind, sometimes paying the full amount of that estimated payment is just not feasible. But like Barney's saying, just pay anything that you can toward it so that there's activity, so the IRS begins to realize this person's willing to comply moving forward. And it goes a long, long way when it comes time to negotiate. So that's number one. You got to reform yourself in the eyes of the IRS and just make sure that you are all caught up. Again, watch the previous episode if you need to learn more about that. Second thing though, Barney, assuming all that's done, we talk a lot about the driver's story being your biggest tool when you call the IRS. And if you would, you coach and talk to drivers about this every day. So if you would just talk to us a little more about the driver story and what it means, I think that's going to go a long way for a lot of people.
Right. So this is the critical main theme here. And if there's anything you remember from this episode, it is the whole art of negotiating with the IRS is communicating your human story, your unique story to the IRS agent or agents that are handling your tax account and your issue. That is the art. That is the key thing. So all the prep we're going to talk about, the compliance, it's all painting your story to the IRS. And I'll be upfront with you. Truckers are very proud. When they want me to negotiate for them, I have to have a very frank conversation with them about what's gone on in their lives. If they haven't filed for 5 years, I say, well, what's happened in the last 7 or 8 years, a couple of years before you stopped filing and now?
Sure.
And truckers are very proud. They don't like to show what they think might be weaknesses in their lives. But I'm here to tell you that those events in your life, whether they're family issues, medical issues, they're actually powerful tools when it comes to the IRS working out a fair deal for you. And I'll give you an example that is in the IRS textbooks of how to accommodate taxpayers, people that are alcoholics. In the IRS code is an actual allowance for people that have dealt with addiction. Of course, we want to hopefully be able to say that you've worked through it, either through addiction programs, and you've come to sobriety, and that's part of you bringing your paperwork together and cleaning up your lives and having a positive interaction with the IRS moving forward.
Yeah.
That's how we want to present this. And I also hope while you're hearing this, you don't think for a second that I'm some kind of cheerleader for our tax code and all of this. My job is to help a trucker navigate the highway of the IRS codes and represent the trucker in the best possible light. But I'm not a cheerleader for this system. I'll tell you that right now. I think a lot of this is nuts, honestly.
Sure.
But it is what it is. We're here. We're in America. We're trying to earn a decent living, and we have to contend with this bureaucracy in the best possible light to have minimal stress and minimal financial loss.
Of course. Well, I mean, it's like people always say, you got to learn how to play the game because we're not here making the rules. So your job is really, like you said, to navigate an exceptionally large and complicated highway of tax law. And at the same time, it's like, just circling back around to this comment from Barney, it's okay to be human. It's best to be human. Show that you are not a perfect person, because the IRS deals with this all day, every day, of all the crazy stories and happenstance that puts people into these situations. I would say, the IRS is willing to hear just about anything other than you don't believe in paying in taxes. If you go to the IRS and say, I don't believe in paying in taxes, you're going to be out of luck, as they say. But
that's a deal killer.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
We can't say that. We can't say the IRS is not constitutional and we don't believe in paying. Whatever we believe, unfortunately, there's the face we have to show to the bureaucracy.
True. And at the end of the day, there are things that are more beneficial and that make more sense related to why people are in this situation 99 times out of 100. It's not because they don't believe in paying in taxes. That I guarantee you they don't want to pay taxes. Not very few people do, but there's an underlying problem or situation that caused it. So when Barney talks about building your story, it's just, being able to quickly articulate what happened. Was it a medical issue? Was there some huge change in your life? Was there some sort of a pandemic happened? Who knows? Just be able to articulate that so that you or your representative, like someone like Barney, can share that with the IRS. That's the foundation of the negotiation, from the standpoint of this conversation. Obviously, the true foundation is paying and getting caught up on your taxes. But when this conversation happens, it's understanding your story, for sure.
It's really important for you to understand as a trucker that in the mix of all the millions of taxpayers out there, and the millions, it's over 15 million taxpayers last time I checked, that owe the IRS money and have to negotiate. In the mix of all these people, the truth is, truckers really look good. You have to understand, when an agent picks up the phone, they may have just gotten off the phone with a guy that hasn't reported in years, has made tons of money, has a Mercedes-Benz in his driveway, a Lamborghini, has a yacht, and is living the high life. That is part of the bunch of characters the IRS is contending with when they're figuring out how to treat you. And the truth is, truckers are hard workers, and they're not millionaires. I mean, who are we kidding? Okay? So as long as we can just make sure the agent understands who you are and what you're trying to do, and how you have to sometimes scrape by every day, you're going to be in a much better position. Now, look, there are some agents that don't understand trucking. They see the 1099, they see you grossed 100 grand, 150, maybe 200 grand, and they can't see past that. They've never worked with truckers, there's no truckers in their family, and they think you're rich because of your 1099's gross amount.
Sure.
I'm going to be honest with you. When I get agents like that, most of the time I just try to get out of the phone call. I can tell that they have made this assumption that the trucker I'm representing is a millionaire and has tons of money. And I very politely just back out of the conversation. I say, hey, you're raising some great issues. I don't have some of the paperwork to address them. Let me get my ducks in a row and call back. And, thankfully, ATBS gives me a bank of phones. And while I'm on the phone with this guy who doesn't understand truckers, ATBS has other lines that I'm calling on hold with the IRS. I get out of the call politely.
Sure.
I don't really tell the guy what I think of him. And I just wait on hold again. And this can be really tough. I mean, if we're walking you through doing it yourself, you went through all the phone stuff, and you do happen to mesh with an IRS agent that you're just not clicking with, it's hard to say, I got to call back because this guy or woman is, he's not understanding what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But this is actually one of the most powerful negotiating tools in the kit bag is knowing when you're clicking and when you're not.
And we're going to talk a lot about that here in a little further along in the call, so thank you for prefacing it. Let's continue on. We've got, you are compliant, right, from a driver's standpoint. You're up to date on your compliance. You have, changed the way the IRS sees you from the standpoint of your activity. You're showing them you're willing to play the game. You've got your story ready. You're 99% of the way there. All you need to do now, prior to the phone call, is get your documentation ready. So when we talk about documentation, I think the most obvious thing is any notices or letters that you've received from the IRS, so you can speak to it. It's pretty standard. Make sure you've got that. A lot of people will, within their story, something happened medically, and there was a medical situation or a series of medical problems or whatever that might have gotten in the way. Barney, I know that a lot of people would default to like getting pages and pages and pages of bills and receipts and diagnoses and all this stuff. But as I understand it, the IRS, if within the story that you are going to present, you have a medical issue, it's simpler than that. I think all they're looking for is just a letter from your physician to help them understand what happened, right?
Yeah, and I learned this the hard way. When I was new to working with the IRS representing people, I would dump, I would fax them hundreds of pages of medical records, and the IRS would get mad at me.
Sure.
And again and again, they would say, hey, we're not doctors. We don't understand medical records. The most effective medical communication is a simple note from a doctor on their letterhead, so it has their contact information, their address, their phone.
Right,
which
right.
I rarely see the IRS actually use. They just want to see that the doctor's contact available, information's available.
Got it.
Just 3 sentences from the doctor that summarizes the taxpayer's condition. A very powerful tool. So whenever I'm talking to a trucker and I hear any medical issue, I immediately say, hey, call the doctor, ask for a short letter, send me a copy so I have it in our files. Keep that available. And when I'm negotiating with the IRS, when I send the power of attorney, which is our permission to review your account with the IRS agent, I'll include doctor's letters, even whether we get to the conversation yet or not.
Yeah, right.
It's included in my submission. I want it in front of the agent while we're speaking.
So super simple. The takeaway here is that if a medical situation diagnosis is part of this story, go to your doctor, make sure it's on their letterhead, so contact information's there, make sure there's just a real brief description of what happened, and then have the doctor sign it, the physician,
right.
whoever
and
it is.
These don't need to be, death medical conditions.
Right.
Any medical issue, it just takes you off track. And even if it resolved itself and you're better, you still were off track while you were dealing with whatever the medical issue is. Don't
Right.
outthink this. Don't outthink this. Put it in front of the IRS agent. And there's many topics too, and we're not going to actually be able to cover them all in a short broadcast.
Right.
But another one that I see a lot, especially with our older truckers, are when people in the family pass away.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be an immediate family member, though, of course, that's very powerful if you lose your spouse or you lose a child, but losing parents or losing, aunts and uncles, extended family that still played a role in your life. This all needs to be on the table. This all is part of your story. And it has a powerful effect when we're trying to work things out.
For sure. So one other thing that we talk about a lot, Barney, is when it comes to documentation, a Form 433F, which you can explain far better than me. As I understand it, this is basically a financial summary of your life, your revenue, your expenses, personal business, so that the IRS can have an idea of how much money you actually can pay them. And, it's used a lot. I believe it's required when you're going through an offer in compromise, which we'll talk about a couple episodes down the line. But I think you recommend it a lot, even if people are just doing a standard negotiation, putting an installment agreement in place, a lot of terms that we'll talk about. But this form really helps the IRS make sure that they don't ask you for more money than you're actually able to pay. Is this something that you recommend every time somebody calls into the IRS?
It depends on the balance that you owe. But if your balances are over 15,000, 20,000, I'm absolutely going to start recommending that you include the financial form, the 433F. But there are some things that you need to know, because one of my concerns about forms is they're a box, and they say, stay in this box and tell us about the things in this box. And I'll tell you exactly where that doesn't help for truckers. So when you or me representing you call the IRS to try to work out a payment plan, they will spit out a number they want every month, and that high amount per month is to get you to pay it off in a certain amount of time.
Got it.
The reason we never recommend you agree to that high amount is we know trucking. And you, as well as we, know that anything can happen during your year. And you can have a breakdown, someone can hit you, and you're out of action for a month, 2 months. Those 2 months that you're out of action, if you've committed to a higher monthly payment, that's a problem. Because once we get a deal from the IRS on a payment plan, we don't want to miss the payments. They get very aggressive, and it's a nasty mark on your record if you fall out of that. For those of you that say, yeah, but I want to pay it off fast, you need to understand there's no fee or penalty to throw more money at your balance anytime. And another great thing a lot of people don't know is when you're on a low payment plan, some of your older years can actually time out. There's a statute of limitations. The IRS can only collect on a tax year for 10 years after they get it from you. And for many of our truckers, this has been one of our biggest successes. We negotiate them into a low payment plan, and silently and quietly, their older year balances just drop off. And what we do is we don't do it the day they drop off. We wait a couple weeks, and then if the trucker does want to get into an even lower payment plan, we just out of the blue call the IRS and say, hey, we want to revisit the payment plan to see if it's possible we can go lower. And this is the conversation. The IRS agent pulls up the account. They actually won't see the year that dropped off. That's the key. You don't want them to see you got the benefit
of
$40,000 on your 2011 return dropped off. They just see a lower balance. And most of the time, you know what I'll hear? The agent will say, I don't know why you're even paying this much based on your balance. So this is a key strategy that we walk our truckers through, or will do for you, to really cut your tax balance.
Yep. And we'll talk more about that in a couple episodes too, as part of a more comprehensive strategy or guide to some of the strategies and tactics. One thing that people need to know, though, is that clock doesn't start ticking until that return is filed with the IRS. So, a lot of people will come to us and say, oh, I didn't file my 2010 taxes, whatever, and it's 2021, that balance is going to drop off. No, if you file the 2010 taxes today, the clock starts today. So again, another great reason, and really the core of what we keep talking about is the most important thing you could possibly do is step one, which is get compliant, get your taxes filed, get that clock ticking, and start paying your taxes every year. So
if you never file a tax return, and we're not just talking about the IRS, many of the things we're saying here apply to your balance due on your state return if you're in a taxing state. If you never file a return with your federal government and states that require it, they can audit that tax year forever.
Ouch.
Okay.
That's a long time.
Critical thing that we want you to know.
So just wrapping up the pre-call stuff, right? You better be compliant. I don't know how many times we're just going to keep saying it so that people remember. You need to reform yourself in the eyes of the IRS. You need to have your story prepped and ready to go, and any necessary documentation too. Once you have all this, you or your representative, the enrolled agent, or whoever, someone like Barney, that's going to negotiate for you, can comfortably make that call. They are ready to get started. And so let's shift then, Barney, to what to do during the call with the IRS. And again, we could talk for hours, and this video could be 18 hours long if all we did was talk about strategies, which is why we're going to try and keep away from it as much as we can today. And then we're going to condense those down for a couple episodes out. But let's talk about the general specifics and the general specifics. Let's talk about the specifics here. First,
so
go ahead. I was going to ask you, because you already talked about it. The state of the IRS, getting somebody on the phone is tough. On a normal day, how long do you think it takes to get an IRS agent on the phone if you're calling from the public line, if you could put an estimate on it?
Oh, I'm absolutely going to recommend you, before you lift up the phone, you at least allow 2 hours,
Okay.
at least, to accomplish your task.
Got it. So from the standpoint of the kind of back door, the line that an agent like you could use, how long does it take on average, would you say?
I'm going to say 40 minutes.
So
on the back door line.
Right. So an advantage to having, if you're uncomfortable or unwilling or don't have the time to do this, obviously another advantage of having a professional help is that they can get to the IRS more quickly. But Barney, we're about to go into what happens on the phone call. Do you have any other comments prior to, or anything else you want to talk about prior to getting an agent on the phone?
So whether with our coaching or with what you're learning today, have your story of your life. And look, if you really had no problems and you just were trucking, which I still have truckers, I go through all this and they're like, look, I don't have any problems. I didn't have any problems. Some of them say to me, I hate filing taxes.
Yeah.
And I was trucking. But the truth, even then, is it really was pretty impossible for them to file taxes while they were learning how to be an independent trucker. They were not at their home, they were driving, and that reason is still acknowledged by the IRS, and we use that successfully day in and day out. If you had a perfect life, that just being away, being on the road as your method of making money was the reason that you were late on filing tax years.
Well, and it's just so, I mean, we've been doing this ATBS 23 years, right? Since 1998. We know how hard it is to manage the paperwork, the bookkeeping, the taxes for your business. And so that's why ATBS exists, is to help people take that and get it done for them so that they don't fall behind with the IRS, which we'll talk about. We don't need to plug ATBS throughout this whole thing, but ATBS really is designed to make sure that your IRS compliance all the way through this is never an issue. ATBS, if you utilize our services, the whole point is that this is taken care of and done for you at the end of the day. So hopefully you never have to talk to Barney and I about getting caught up with the IRS, something like that. So now we get an agent on the phone, Barney. I know I alluded to it earlier that your phone etiquette, your manners are more important than really anything once you get somebody on the phone, because you're talking to another human being. Nobody likes to be treated poorly. People have bad days. You could have a bad day when you're going through to make that phone call. Do your best to just reset internally. Remember the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated, and make sure that you mind your P's and Q's, please and thank you. That's going to go a long way for you. I don't know. Sometimes we hear people say, oh, I can't wait to get that agent on the phone and give them a piece of my mind about what I think about the IRS. Don't do it.
No, don't do it.
Right.
Give me a peace of mind. And I've actually told truckers, just yell at me. I'll even schedule an appointment where they can yell at me. And then when they're done yelling at me, then they call the IRS. It's
anything you can do to vent that frustration and not take it out on the agent is going to serve you extremely well from the standpoint of the phone call. Okay. So that being said, first thing that we always recommend, as soon as you get an agent on the phone, give them a nice greeting, and then immediately ask them for their agent or their contact information and then their agent number. Right, Barney?
Well, they legally actually don't ask them up front. They legally have to say their name, and the IRS assigns all agents a long number, code, their badge number, their ID number. They're going to say it, but they always say it way too fast, and they don't pronounce their name clearly. So what I say is, hey, thanks for picking up. I'm so glad I got through. Thanks for sharing your name and ID. Can you please repeat it? And they always will. But so this is critical. The first 3 minutes of that phone call with that agent are the most critical moments of, even if it gets into a 4-hour conversation, the first 3 minutes set the entire stage. And I may be too graphic here, and I just can't think of a better analogy, but if you're a dog owner or you're familiar with the animal kingdom, very often, unfortunately, in the opening call with the IRS, there is a who is the dominant person in the room. And I'm going to just tell you straightforward, you just got to hand it over. You have to just give that agent the dominance. We've talked about, hey, it's not clicking, I'm going to get out. But even the greatest deals I've gotten with agents that were rough at first, it's all about just handing over the dominance of who's in charge.
Sure.
You just have to let the agent know that they are in charge of the conversation. And this is not easy. This is not easy for me. Look, the IRS has different tiers, and you have to go through lower tier agents and escalate your way through, hopefully to get to the agent that is authorized to handle your balance due and your issues. And as you're going through this, some of the lower tier agents want to prove that they know more than you and that they are in charge, and you and your taxpayer are losers.
Sure.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is what's out there. But I've had tremendous success just letting it go. I let them win. I let them win on these first couple of questions where they're establishing they are the boss of the call. And you just need to understand that. And look, I've shared this with truckers, coaching them through it, and some truckers just draw the line there and say, I can't do it. I cannot do that. In those examples, get a professional to do it for you.
For sure.
This is just the truth. But I will tell you that if you hand over that dominant thing early in the call, it has given me tremendous success when I'm then really getting into the nitty-gritty of your story and what it's going to take to get you a good deal so you can, keep driving.
Sure.
I mean, that is also the theme of this negotiation is, look, if this gets out of hand and we can't negotiate, you're not going to get anything. I mean, I never say that, but that is the implication.
That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And a couple things why we encourage gathering that contact information. One, for your records, right? Just so you can have a track record of who you spoke to, when. But at the same time, this is true of any customer service interaction. When someone knows that interaction is being recorded, documented, the level of customer service just naturally goes up, right? This is just accountability does this to people, as well it should. Your accountability goes up when you know that there is a track record of this conversation happening. And I imagine Barney's seen it, where if the agent doesn't get their contact information or they rattle it off and no one cares, it's not like it's fair game for them, right? And that they're going to just do whatever they want. But when you get that contact information and you ensure that you write it down, and it's going to change the way that they interact with you, even just ever so slightly. They know that you are someone who is willing to hold them accountable at the end of the day. So super important. Then, oh, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad you raised that.
Yeah. And
it's unfortunate, but it's human nature that when we know that, we're people are documenting, our communication, it keeps them in the bounds more, unfortunately. So
For
it's very
sure.
effective. Yeah,
And it's really important, right?
it is.
Now, at this point in the video call, Barney and I could talk until, Sunday morning about all the different strategies that we could use, that Barney and his team could use to help you negotiate your debts and all the things you can do. And so we do not have time for that today. We have an entirely separate episode where Barney is going to walk through a lot of these strategies. He's already mentioned a few. He's going to go into further detail with a bunch more. So this is where the magic happens for Barney and for people who are willing and brave enough to do this themselves. So make sure you continue to watch the series, because we will have an episode where we get into the nitty gritty. Like, here are the things and the opportunities and the options that you have. But what we like to talk about, and Barney's already mentioned it a few times, is there's really secret weapons, a strong word, right? But just a tool or a tactic that you can use. And we call it internally shuffling the deck, which is, you hear a lot that sometimes life deals you a bad hand and you just got to learn how to play it. When it comes to the IRS, you don't have to play the hand that you're dealt. And so what we talk about a lot is that if your conversation, and Barney can explain it better than me, there's no rule saying that you have to settle your IRS problems with the first person you speak with. There's no rule saying that you have to work with the same agent the whole time. So if for some reason you and the agent aren't on the same page, or you get on the phone call and you can tell personalities are going to conflict or whatever the case may be, we call it shuffling the deck, and just that you can get off that phone call back in, play a different hand. And there are ways to do this. There are right ways to do this versus wrong ways to do this, and we'll talk about it. But I know Barney talks about how, would you rather play through a crappy hand with a low percentage chance of being successful, or would you rather take the time to call back in? We know it's hard and it's annoying and it's frustrating to sit on the phone. And when you get a person on the phone, you get really excited. It's like, oh my gosh, thank you for picking up. Let's get this done. But sometimes you just have to hang up that phone and try again. I know it's a big tactic
There
that
is
Barney
one
uses.
tip.
Go ahead.
If you do that, and the next agent you speak to says, "Hey, I see you called recently and spoke to another agent," you always want to stay positive. That's key.
Sure.
So I say, "Yeah, they gave me some great pointers, and I realized I needed some more facts and documentation to really present this taxpayer's issue correctly. So they were extremely helpful, and based on our conversation that other day or an hour ago, I'm calling back to build on that."
For sure. And let's talk about some of the right ways to do this. First things first, always lead with thank you for your time today. Even if you're only on the phone for 30 seconds, just be polite, right? Always mind your P's and Q's. And some of the easiest rationale that you can say that Barney uses when he needs to is, just like you said, boy, I got to do more research. I realize that I got to go, think about what I need to talk about. I need to go get more documentation, whatever the case may be. Totally reasonable. The IRS wants you to do that. Or I need to call back after I just review what we've talked about so far. Hey, I need to talk to my tax accountant and see if I can get that question answered. You can leverage Barney, ATBS. Say, hey, I just need to call ATBS and make sure that I understand what you're asking today, so that I can do this, right? So, two really common ways. Now, if you realize immediately that you were dealt a bad hand, whatever the case may be, for our drivers especially, two really easy and very reasonable ways to get off the phone is that you're probably driving, most likely, right? Hey, I'm on the road. Let me give you a call back when I'm not driving and it's safe for me to talk. Super easy way to get off the phone. Same line of thinking is that, hey, when I started my call, I was parked and now I'm driving. So let me give you a call back when I'm parked again, when I'm back home, whatever the case may be. If anybody argues with this, I would be genuinely surprised, because it's just it's a matter of your safety, right? So a quick and easy way to get off the phone.
Yeah, I've never had anyone argue with you needing to get off the call.
Yep, got it. So at the end of the day, you can always take a break and call back in, but you got to remember that at some point you got to bite the bullet and you have to have this conversation. And so it's really easy to go overboard with this. And you take that first 3 minutes and you're feeling somebody out and you say, oh, well, it's not, a match made in heaven. Let me try again. And you do this 6 or 7 times. And now it's been 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, because you got to find the time to do it. As soon as you have someone that you feel is reasonable and someone that you can have a dialogue with, move forward, get it done. I think that's what I would say. And I know I'm saying that because I know that's what Barney says. So that's how it goes.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other
great notes? They'll put it in, and you're not going to get, unless you're kind of in deep doo-doo, you're not assigned a unique agent to your case. The IRS will only assign a revenue officer to you, to your situation, a revenue officer that has a direct phone number and a direct mailing address. When they see blood in the water and they think there's a lot of unpaid tax money at stake, then the IRS will invest the resources in a dedicated agent. I'll tell you right now, that's a much tougher negotiation for me, because then
totally.
I'm not just dealing with a group of IRS agents where I can swim through them a little bit to find the person I want to work with. When a revenue officer is nailed to your account, then that's a whole different ballgame. There are lots of strategies for working directly with a revenue officer. I'm not sure we'll go through that in one of these episodes. That's a different ballgame.
Yeah, and we talk about it a lot. And Barney, what I do want to just talk about balances due and revenue officers a little bit, so that people can understand there are number one, no one's situation is the same, right? Every call with the IRS is different. But like Barney just said, revenue officer gets assigned. They are like the pit bulls of the IRS. Their job, they are the world's best collection agents. It's their job to identify people who they want to get money from. And so if a revenue officer is assigned, and you don't have to listen to me about anything that we're saying today, I would pay a professional like Barney to handle that conversation. You don't want to deal with a revenue officer if you can avoid it. You want a professional to do so, because it's less of a negotiation and more like just getting beat up in an octagon and then having to, just kind of heal yourself up afterward and see if you can negotiate still. It's just a lot harder. And so if a revenue officer gets assigned, and Barney, maybe you can help people understand how they would know, then it's time to call a professional. And I would not recommend doing this yourself. I just wouldn't do it.
So some of the things we look at when we'll tell a trucker, we think you need us to do this for you. And that's another thing I just love about working at ATBS is there's no pressure to sell anything. It really has to make sense for each trucker's situation. We know that income is tight. Truckers are balancing what they make versus their expenses. And we treat tax services no different than parts and fuel. What is the smartest purchase? What makes the most sense for the trucker's money?
Absolutely.
But we will get more aggressive, saying we recommend you have representation based on your balances, based on what the IRS is doing to you.
Sure.
And definitely in that mix is if a revenue officer has been assigned. We're going to say, look, this is look, I don't know how to drive a tractor trailer. I can't drive a tractor trailer.
Sure.
I drive IRS regulations and IRS negotiations. This is what I do. If you've been assigned a revenue officer, get a professional team to represent you so they can match forces against the IRS's toughest hitters.
Totally. And so you mentioned there are a couple situations in my mind, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The three that stand out to me that we tend to tell people professional representation is generally a better fit than trying to do this yourself. Large balance due. And really what I would say is if your balance due to the IRS is 50 grand or more, because as soon as you hit 50,000, you start going deeper into the underbelly of the IRS. And it's just like Barney said, you got to call one person, then you get funneled to another, and then another and another. And everywhere you go, every step lower you go, it gets harder and harder to negotiate because your balance is bigger and they want that money. And so that's one, if you have a large balance due. If a revenue officer is assigned, or if there's immediate action about to be taken, about to be taken, or it's happening right now, like a levy, like a wage garnishment. Call the pros is all we do. You know, Barney's got a back door sort of to the IRS, a faster way to get to the IRS from the phone standpoint, and can make this happen more quickly than you can working 14 hours a day on the road. It's just the reality of the situation.
There is one other rule that I've just learned working with truckers is your stress level.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, truckers react differently to IRS and state debt. If it's tying you up in knots, if it's affecting your quality of life, the great thing about the programs at ATBS is we do have some low-cost options where you at least have a partner. Our power of attorney programs are not expensive. They let us call the IRS and get a compliance report, check what you're eligible for, and then we'll go over that report with you to help you map out different tax-saving strategies.
Absolutely.
That alone, I have seen even people with lower balances. I've had truckers stressed out that owe $7,000, but they're just really stressed about it. The power of attorney program is inexpensive, and they immediately just de-stress. They calm down when I go over their compliance report with them and give them the strategies to make it better.
Totally. And, you know, we, like Barney's saying, power of attorney program, we have a program for people who are do-it-yourself, self-starters, you know, who aren't terribly stressed about dealing with the IRS. We have a program where you have one-on-one coaching with Barney and our tax relief team. The tax relief pit crew team will literally have a one-on-one coaching session with you and get you everything that you need afterward to go do this yourself. Then we have programs where, you know, letting the professionals come in and take over, you know, can be really beneficial. And some getting, you know, even have really advanced, very in-depth strategies. You know, it's across the board, like Barney said, and we're not afraid to turn people away who we say, you don't need us. It's completely unnecessary for you to pay us to do this work. At the end of the day, our job is to find the program that's going to fill whatever gap that you have. So, you know, really at the end of the day, it's just providing maximum value to get you from where you are to where you want to go. And do we need to be in there or not is something that we can help you decide. And whether it's a coaching session, a power of attorney, or it's, hey, turn all this over. Barney is going to, you know, stop wage garnishments. We're filing tons of tax returns. We're doing offer and compromise. Who knows? ATBS can help. So I think this is probably a good point, Barney, because we got to be an hour into this already. It goes by fast when you and I get on a video call together. If we were to sum this up, my whole thing at this point is that I hope everybody just has a better idea of getting prepared for the call and a little bit about, you know, what it takes to, or what happens during the phone call. And I apologize if people were hoping to get a bunch of tactics and strategies and stuff like that today, but we felt like that deserves its own video call where all we're going to do is talk about that. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense if you don't understand the process of getting to that point. And so what we're going to talk about in the next series is step 3. So we talked about step 1 last video, obtaining compliance. Today's video is the general, you know, process of what a negotiation with the IRS looks like. So we just wanted to pull that curtain back a little bit. Then the next video is going to be how to manage your compliance. So I use the analogy a lot that negotiation with the IRS is like open heart surgery. If you don't get it, you're in trouble. Your business is going to die at some point. You just will not be able to keep up with what will eventually compound and turn into a major issue for you down the line. It's got to get done. But what we see all the time is people end up on the operating table like 12 months later, 24 months later, because we went through and did all this incredible work to get them out of trouble with the IRS, and they did not manage their compliance. The hardest part of this, I would argue, is managing compliance when it's done, because it never ends. It's not like I'm going to go get caught up and then I'm going to do my negotiation and now I'm done. Those are all one-off things, right? You do it, you check it off the box. Managing your compliance is it is a daily job for the rest of your life of your business. That's the reality. And so ATBS is designed to take this off of people's hands. But we are going to talk a lot about how to manage your compliance so that you do not end up on the operating table again. Barney, we had a story, and obviously we're not going to name names from client standpoint, but I feel like we had somebody that you had a really successful, incredible outcome with maybe a year ago that didn't manage their compliance, and all of a sudden they're in hot water again, right?
Yeah, the trucker hadn't filed for almost 20 years.
Oh,
Their balance due was almost $1 million. The IRS had filed returns in lieu of their returns, and we can go over what that is. So they had a tremendous balance, but they retained ATBS, and we were able to reduce that by over $700,000. We got knocked off by filing the returns and negotiating. And we stayed in touch with the trucker. We reminded the trucker about making quarterly activity and just showing activity on payments. The trucker was still financially strapped, so we were walking them through just do activity, but the trucker didn't do any activity at all. And it unwound all of the savings that we had negotiated. It's a real heartbreak. Yeah, it's a killer.
That I can imagine the only thing worse than being in trouble to that magnitude with the IRS is getting out of trouble with the IRS and getting back into it. I mean, the amount of stress it would crush me personally. I mean, forget the financial aspect of it. Just knowing that you're going to have to go through this again, it just makes you sick to your stomach, man. It's terrible. And so for everybody listening, our goal is to make sure that if you have to do this, and again, a lot of times just obtaining compliance is going to avoid you even having to negotiate in the first place. But if you have to go through and do this, we never want you to do it again. And so there is a right way to manage your compliance. If you're an owner operator, a company like ATBS can literally do it for you. And so we'll talk about that in next week's episode. Then the episode afterward, we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at negotiation strategies and tactics. And Barney, it's going to be the Barney show that day. And he's going to talk to us about all the things that you could do, all the things that we do. And then pretty soon, for those of us who are following us on social media, following along with this series, just submit questions that you have. Doesn't really matter to Barney and I. Anything related to back taxes, anything related to the IRS, negotiations, anything you can think of, just start submitting those questions to us. You can email them directly to, info@atbs.com. You can ask them on our Facebook page. You can do it on Instagram. It doesn't really matter to us. Start asking those questions, because the final video that we're going to do in this series is just Q&A with people who've been following along. And we'd be happy to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So Barney, this is the Barney show when we talk about negotiations. So I know we're trying to keep it at a high level, but do you have any sort of summary, any sort of follow-up, anything you think we missed that we should talk about?
Just a reminder, the biggest takeaway is truckers are respected. The IRS knows ATBS. They know that you're not millionaires on a yacht, and your story is important. And when it's communicated, there is a path to getting a fair deal on your situation. So just know that and try not to stress about it. We attack it one step at a time, and we're here for you.
There's a lot of different ways we can do it. So if anybody is listening, watching, and they're like, holy cow, I mean, we haven't even gotten into the nitty-gritty details and this sounds like too much, just call ATBS. Our team would be happy to walk you through the program that's best fit for you, if any, and get you going. And we talked about how now is a fantastic time to go through, and we know even though it's hard to get a hold of the IRS agents, now's a great time to get this stuff done, get caught up, get these plans in place, and just move on from this stuff. And put the IRS in your rearview mirror. And like we talk about, the IRS is not going away. Anybody that tells you, oh, the IRS will never be a part of your life again is lying to you. Death and taxes, those are the two things. But we can take the IRS away from being an obstacle. Like Barney says, navigating this ridiculous, complicated, convoluted highway of the IRS, we can put that behind you. And so if you're stressed about it, if you're worried about it, if you just want to learn more, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through it. The big takeaway for me today is that it's all about preparation. You know, it's getting compliant, it's getting your story, it's getting your paperwork, and then leveraging a professional when the situation gets a little more serious. Otherwise, you know, we have a program where we can coach you through how to do this. So give us a call. You know, Barney and his team would be happy to walk you through for a very low and very reasonable fee how to do this yourself if these videos aren't enough. But hopefully by the end of this series, you might be able to do it without even calling us at all. But we're always here to help if you need us to. All right, Barney, any last talking points for you?
No, thanks so much. I think you really covered it well.
I think so. I think that we got through the basics of it today. So everybody, next week, we will see you there, and we're going to talk about making sure you never have to do this again. Make sure you never end up on the operating table again. So Barney, thanks again for your time.
Amen.
Good luck this week and next week, and we'll chat with everybody in a couple days. Thanks.
Take care.
See ya.